Okay. I think we did it.
Great.
Okay, we're live. We're on YouTube as far as I know.
Okay.
Okay, Dan, thank you for agreeing to talk with me today.
Sure. My pleasure.
Um, so, um, maybe can you give just a quick intro of who you are? For
Sure.
people who don't have a sense of LA, the LA Jewish, community.
Sure. So my name is Dan Messinger. I am the owner of Bibi's Bakery and Cafe, which is a kosher bakery and cafe on Pico Boulevard in one of the Jewish neighborhoods of LA. There are lots of Jews in LA and many different pockets of Jewish neighborhoods, but Pico Boulevard, specifically the Pico Robertson area, is definitely known as one of the central hubs. We're about 10 to 15 minutes from Sinai Temple over in the Westwood area. I know that specifically because I'm there often and often driving between the bakery and either Sinai Temple or Sinai Akiba, the school. So I know all of the quickest routes to get to and from the bakery. I'm also the owner of the Kosher Cookie Company, which is a sort of sister company to Bibi's, and we do online and local custom cookies and special cookie orders. And that's actually where I am now. I'm in my other location, which is the Cookie Company Bakery.
And, and that's not in Pico Robertson.
That it's not in Pico Robertson. It happens to also be on Pico Boulevard, about a mile and a half east. So it's a little bit east and close enough to the bakery and my house that it's feasible. But for most people in the world, we're in the same neighborhood. Within LA, since we're 2 blocks apart, it feels like we're in very different places.
So maybe can you share a little background about baking in your world? How did you end up, here at Bibi's? What did it look like leading up to Bibi's?
Sure. So my personal history on one foot is I grew up in Philadelphia. I went to the University of Michigan and moved out to LA just over 20 years ago after graduating from college and spending a year working for Hillel at the University of Connecticut. My first 10 years in LA, I worked in entertainment. That was why I moved out here. Actually, my first 2 years, I worked at Sinai Temple.
Really?
I was the youth director at Sinai Temple, which maybe you didn't know, but I worked with Howard Lessner as the executive director. My wife was a teacher at Sinai Akiba at the time.
We're coming full circle now.
It's for sure. Rabbi Wolpe, married my wife and I. So I have lots of deep connections to the Sinai Temple community, and now I have connections both because I like it as a community and as a synagogue, and also we do a lot of business. So I moved to LA. I worked in entertainment for 10 years, doing some TV work and production work, and then the last 5 years in entertainment, I was working running production for a small marketing company where we did a lot of big brand marketing. Within the entertainment world. So towards the end of that, I was feeling burnt out and wanted to switch up my career.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always had liked cooking and baking. I'm not professionally trained as either a chef or a baker, but I always enjoyed it and was looking for opportunities to have my own business. And I saw that Bibi's was available for sale. And I thought, you know what, that's a place where I liked it. I was there as a customer. I had felt like it had lost a bit of its luster, as businesses often do when owners get tired. So in the same way that I was tired in my current profession, I think the previous owners of Bibi's were tired with what they were doing, and they were looking to move on, and so was I. So I took it over. I bought the business, and now it's been about nine years, and in that I have certainly learned quite a bit of baking and cooking, and also been able to use my experience in marketing and production to try to grow that business.
I've read the articles in the Jewish Journal.
Mm-hmm.
In one of them, you mentioned early on, like there was an excitement about when you were starting, what it was, what the business was going to look like. There was a level of creativity and like juices flowing with the new business. That's been kind of reinvigorated now. That what is it? Necessity is the mother.
The mother of invention.
Before we get to now, and how this is affecting creativity. I would like to start in the beginning and ask, like, so what did it look like, when you were starting the business? Like, what did that creativity, and how did that, manifest itself?
So I was coming out of marketing and production, so we were focused on building brands and creating and selling ideas and communicating those ideas to the public. And so, I looked at Bibi's from a similar perspective, where we had a product that we wanted to get out, and it's about communicating that to your customer base. Now, when I took over the store, they were doing a certain type of food, they were doing a certain number of products, and doing some things well and some things not as well. So my first year, or first couple of years, was about rebuilding the brand that was Bibi's, because it had a fair amount of capital of recognition, but some of it was negative and some of it was positive because of the way that the business had evolved over the years. So, that meant figuring out what products people wanted and how to market it to them, figure out where the customers were and how to communicate with them, and also really building relationships with the local community, whether that is synagogues and institutions like Sinai and other local schools and shuls, or other businesses. We do some wholesale as well, so it had to do with creating relationships with other business owners, other restaurants and caterers, and really showing that we're willing to create products for them. And so that was definitely interesting, and that meant creating, this logo, which is on my shirt, was a new logo. So we rebranded from that perspective, and then making sure that brand was present on any of our materials. So if it's a sticker that you're seeing in the store, or you're in your local supermarket and you see a Bibi's bag of pita, it should have that same, in this case, an oven hearth, and that should start to create a connection between the product we have, and hopefully a quality product, and what our brand is. And so that, has always been the case. If I can sort of transition over the past 9 years, I've always tried to keep that in mind, but all of us who have worked in the same job for any number of years can know that, like, we get into our cycle. Bakery and kosher food is very cyclical. We work holiday to holiday, we work week to week, Shabbat to Shabbat. So it's very easy to get stuck in, well, this is how we do things. And that, of course, has been somewhat upended over the past few months, and even more so over the past week. I mean, things change at a pretty alarming rate.
So how did you first start adapting? Say like around Purim. That was right around the time that we were closing.
Yeah.
First of all, when you make hamantashen, and were the hamantashen sales like delivered? Were they not? Like, is that kind of where it started? Was that the transitional pastry?
So that's good. Yes, that was the traditional pastry for Corona. We'll always look back at the hamantashen. It's interesting. God, it seems like years ago that Purim. I mean, yesterday seems like years ago. So it's hard to even think about Purim. But yes, that is exactly the time. And I would say most of our hamantashen orders actually were fulfilled because it was synagogues and institutions primarily who were sending them out to their congregants or communities, do it, or a week or two ahead of the holiday, because they need to have a package delivered and then redistributed.
Interesting. Like in some ways that kind of set the tone for what would be happening, like for the next few months.
Well, yes. I mean, it was actually it was handy that, like, the big orders I had for different synagogues, for example, were 2 weeks before Purim or a week before Purim. So we were fulfilling those, and you could start to see the writing on the wall. People were talking about Corona, but there was no sense of quarantine. There was no sense of real change in terms of the way that people were interacting with the restaurant. Then, right as Purim came, we slowly saw right at Purim that a number of events were canceled. So we had lots of catering events related to Purim or not that were starting to be like, well, I'm going to check in again, or I'm reducing my order, or I don't know what's going to happen. They put it on hold. And then one by one, sort of, they all fell and were canceled. I remember going to a Megillah reading, and I remember going to a Purim celebration that was far smaller than typical at Ikar, and we ended up doing some Hamantaschen for that event, even though all of the other kind of Hamantaschen for large Megillah readings had basically been canceled because they weren't holding those events. And that was sort of like an afterthought. It was like, oh, we're doing it. Can you throw a couple hundred Hamantaschen? Which was, already we were sort of planning that. Shortly thereafter that, everything that was a planned event canceled. And it was interesting because they were starting to cancel, and I was starting to proactively call the customers who had ordered and say, like, listen, everyone else is canceling, but you still have a meeting that's on the books for 2 days from now. I just want to make sure, do you still need this? And they were like, yes, yes, yes. And then an hour before, no. I mean, everything just disappeared.
Yeah. So, I mean, that must have been like more than frustrating. Like, I mean, from an economic perspective, I mean, that's really difficult. So, I mean, how did you, like, what did the recovery look like? I mean, you don't have to get into the details necessarily about like on the ground and like monetarily, but, like in the shop, like in the bakery itself, what, how did you move from that to, what it looks like now when you walk in, the masks, the tables to the side, the deliveries, what
so, sure. So, right as things, and the actual dates are all muddled at this point, but I would say once the catering sort of dried up and it was clear that no one was doing any kind of gatherings, then it was clear that we really needed to transition to an adjusted business model. And the writing there was on the wall for quarantines and people's stay-at-home orders. And this was, now between Purim and Pesach. Again, these are sort of the benchmarks of our calendar. And, we started to think, there was talk among other restaurateurs, like, are we going to be able to still be open? What's going to happen? Will we be able to do delivery and pickup? Will we be able to have dine-in? Because there were just a lot of unknowns, and we really didn't know. So what I did, and this is now already a week or two before Pesach, as people were starting to really not be going out, I don't remember exactly when we were forbidden to have diners inside, but as it was clear that people were not going out as much or were going to be concerned, we, who have always done pickup and delivery, pushed that more. We're on all the different delivery services, Postmates, Grubhub, Uber, all that. In fact, I was on Grubhub for pickup, but I expanded it to delivery. So we tried to enable all of those options. And I created something for our Friday purchases. Fridays were our biggest day for challah and for baked goods as people get ready their stuff for Shabbat. So we created a delivery service that we hadn't offered before, which drops off what we call a Shabasket, which is your basket of Shabbat needs, a couple of chalot and some cookies. And we've now, over the past number of weeks, expanded the options where you can add on pita bread or extra types of challah rolls or flowers or barekas, different things we offer. It's not our full menu, but it's sort of a pre-order type thing. And I have drivers who will go around in the local area within a couple miles and just drop off the bag at your door. And that was a response to thinking, well, I don't want to lose the customers who aren't willing to come in. And I'd like to offer something for people who really want to have their Shabbat celebration. They need these things, but they don't want to order it. I don't normally offer that through our regular online menu. It's very specific things. And that's been successful, and I'm hoping to grow that. It basically is sort of a new business. It's really a once a week type business. But we've been keeping that, and the people who get it really seem to appreciate that. So that's just an example of ways we had to adapt.
Yeah. You'd mentioned other, both here and also in a Facebook post, other like a newfound relationship with the other kosher restaurants. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious what that looked like, and I'm also curious if you can talk about relationships in general. I think in your last Jewish Journal article, you mentioned how, or maybe it was 2 ago, you mentioned that masks, are really impede trying to build relationships. And so I'd love if you could just talk about relationships in general, like how they flourished during this time and how they, were stifled.
Well, I mean, look, any business and a small business and local community businesses especially are about relationships because, even though it's about our product, it's about the relationship you have with your customers and your local community and feeling that everyone is supporting on each other. And just before everything happened, I really felt like the years of building those relationships were starting to pay off, which is to say that schools and institutions that I had been building relationships with over the years were really starting to come together and come to me instead of me having to just sell to them. They were coming to me and saying, we have things going on. How can we work together? And that was I was feeling very good about that. And that was, and I think that those relationships have helped me get through what is helping me get through these continued difficult times, because as those institutions adapt to their new needs, they're coming to me to say, how can we figure out a way to serve our community given the new parameters of doing business, et cetera. So in terms of other kosher restaurants and businesses, I'm proud that I have good relationships with most every other kosher restaurant on my block, and a lot of them in the cities, because I've either worked with them in trying to sell them product, or I've bought product for them, or we've just sort of, talked about best practices and ways that we can do things. And that has really become all the more so during these challenges. Most days I get texts and phone calls from other kosher restaurants who, in some respects, we are all competitors. We're all competing for the same mouths to feed, but we all feel like we're on the same general team. And we talk about, did you hear there's a curfew tonight, this past week? Or, what's the newest word from the health department and how we need to adjust for our corona things? Are we allowed to be open? Are we not? How are you dealing with this? And it's just been great to be able to work together and figure out solutions for things. We've worked together with a couple of other restaurants where I have in delivering donated food to hospitals for doctors and frontline workers, to the police and other first responders, where we've been able to help people who want to show their appreciation. So different groups and organizations say, we've collected some money. We want to sponsor a meal at Cedars, and we will then fulfill that meal. And that has been a nice win-win. Not everything in the world that we say is win-win actually is, but this has been almost a triple win, where we are getting some business that's replacing a lot of those catering events that no longer exist. The people who are donating are able to really express their appreciation, and the people who are on the receiving end, whether it's a doctor or a firehouse or whatever it is, are also able to feel the love of the community. So that's definitely been a way that we have worked together with some of the other organizations.
And what about masks and the customer relationship?
So, I'm right now in the bakery, and I have one other baker here who's, far away. So we have masks, but I don't, and we don't need to keep it. I mean, it's funny, I don't do a lot of Zooming because my business is not really Zoomable, short of things like this. And I was on a Zoom with my wife for one of my sons' next year sort of school was doing a pre next year Zoom. And I was like, she's on Zoom all day. She's a teacher and she's doing all these things. And I was just like so happy to not be wearing a mask or actually seeing people's faces from like the nose down. Because most of my day I spend both behind the mask and looking at people, only their eyes. Aside from the sort of discomfort of a mask and really impeding our ability to breathe and feel comfortable, you don't see any facial expressions. And like a lot of times when we're talking about these relationships with customers, it's about that sort of slight smile, or you make a joke and you have to be able to read, do they get the joke? Or they make a joke and are they being sarcastic? And those are the kind of things that create that relationship one to another. And it's missing right now. We're literally putting a barrier between us and someone else. And even as simple as a smile, if you're walking on the street, normally people right now are afraid of each other. They don't want to have contact. And if you're walking down the street, you sort of avoid each other. The bare minimum you would do in that situation is at least smile to sort of indicate I'm not a threat. We're just two people who happen to be in this weird situation. But with our masks, our face covered, we can't even make that gesture. And I just find that sad. So I'm not sure what the solution is other than, smiling with your eyes, which is sort of helpful. And also sometimes I will say to someone, we'll have an exchange and I'll say, you can't see that I'm smiling, but I'm smiling because, that was a joke, or I get it, or things like that. That's where masks have come into play.
Yeah. I mean, in the last week with the protests and some of them turning violent, I'd love to know how that impacted you, and I don't know the other restaurants in the Pico area, but like specifically BB's.
Um, well, first of all, thankfully, we've not been vandalized or there's been no damage. I mean, I haven't actually been worried. I haven't felt like the the people who are doing the looting or the vandalism have not really come to our neighborhood. I mean, everything is closer than I would like it to be, um, but nothing has been, you know, on our block per se or anything that I was particularly threatened. Even though some of my neighbors have boarded up their windows, just as a precaution, I haven't felt the need to do that at all. You know, the way that things have affected is the whole city, which was already on edge, is on the next level of edge. I mean, I didn't know. We all thought we were there. Right, we all thought we were already there, and then we pushed it to 11, if you will. We didn't even know that our edge would go to 11, but of course it is. It's one higher. And you know, the curfews have affected us in that we've closed early, and again, people are on a different level of concern. Um, uh, I think there's a big distinction between the people who are protesting that I see, you know, in peaceful, meaningful demonstrating, you know, doing their demonstrations, perhaps not as socially distant as would make sense. And I think people will hopefully not pay the price for that in a couple of weeks. And that is something that I definitely support and understand. You know, I'm behind peaceful demonstration and demonstration for change. And at the same time, I also have felt the need to, you know, express gratitude for the police officers who have been protecting our city. And even though there's definitely been conflict between both sides, I don't think that it really is two sides. I think it's dangerous if we draw that line saying that it's police or demonstrators. I don't think that that's a good idea. I think the way that it's affected my business has been that we've had to adjust to our different hours and different customer patterns. And also, you know, everyone likes to talk. So for a little while, we in some ways had forgotten that there's so much division in our communities and in our world with Corona. Mm-hmm. And then we started to remember there was division because people started to take different sides on the way that we were reacting to the virus. And then this week, you know, the division has surfaced even more as people take a stand within what's been going on the streets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. The levels of division, I hadn't considered that before. Mm-hmm. To kind of put you on the spot, maybe one last question.
Yes.
I'm curious if you take a second to think about it, and if one doesn't come to mind, it's totally understandable. I would love if there would be like a pre-corona, post-corona, if there's a story that really epitomizes your experience at BB's. I know it's a big question. I know,
like my general, you know.
Yeah, like over the last 9 years, if there's like a moment, that you can point to and say like, a relationship, a sale, a catering job, that you think really, kind of, sums up what, this experience of, owning and running this bakery, means to you.
Sure. Well, I mean, there are many experiences that I've had. One very early one that comes to mind, which sort of set the tone, was within my first year of ownership. It was one night, and it was working late, and a Hasidic couple from I want to say Brooklyn. It probably was Brooklyn. I don't remember what part of Brooklyn, had come in, and we were just chatting, and we're talking about babka, and she's like, "Oh, I make this babka every week rather, and here's how I do it." And she's like, "Do you have any dough?" And it happened to be a Thursday night, I think, so my bakers were already in baking for the next day for Shabbat. And I said, "Okay," and I went back and we took some dough. And there's somewhere deep in our Facebook feed, there's a picture of like these two Hasidic Jews and me, showing me different ways of making babka, the different way of executing the dough, on our table. And to me, that was just sort of like, what is going on here? That we have, a woman wearing a wig as was her practice, and her husband with payas, and me there with my apron, and from using the dough from our Guatemalan immigrant bakers who prepare all our stuff, and working together and doing all these things to make this traditional Jewish cake. To me, that was just sort of like this interesting, like, what is going on here? There's all this stuff, and I really sort of loved that element of all the different worlds colliding. And that was many years ago. Since then, our babka execution has improved tremendously with just experience.
That was the question that I was wondering. Yeah,
yes,
that's an important part too of that story.
Well, it was. I mean, her tips were very valuable. It's all part of the evolution of our babka for sure. And lately, look, I really love the fact that the community, all these relationships that have been built over the years are coming to pay off, and I feel that both as a business, because our business has been able to grow with consistency. I mean, I can track returning customers versus new customers, and certainly more than 50% of our customers are returning, which I always feel good about. And just even in these periods where during Corona, and now even more so with this past week of curfews, people who come in or call or text and say, like, how are you guys doing? How can we support you? How can we help? People are thinking about us, and they realize that we are, part of this fabric that helps support the community. And we're because we make bread, it's like as basic and as,
Yeah. Having just finished Masechet Eruvin, I can attest there's nothing that expresses community more than bread.
And it does. And we've done something that we do at the stores. We sell a lot of challah dough. I don't know how many other bakeries do it, but we sell a lot of dough that people can then bake at home. And we do it for a lot of schools and synagogues in session when they're meeting. But a lot of people buy it Thursday nights and Fridays, and then they can take the dough and they sort of skip a few steps and just can braid it and bake it at home and have that feeling of fresh baked challah. And I think that actually has very much created a lot of community also. And we have lots of ways that we can be on people's Shabbat tables, even if they're not buying a finished product from us, and they feel this connection to us because they're getting their hands in it and making their own challah.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you very much, Dan. So if somebody wanted to support Bibi's, I mentioned we can go to Bibi's, and you're open for pickup.
We're open for pickup and delivery, and you can order by calling into the store, and we'll do curbside if you would like. We can bring it out to your car, or you can come in either to pick up or just to order and wait. We are not transitioning to dine in yet, even though the city is allowing slowly restaurants to dine in. Our space is small. The requirements for dine-in seating would really limit the number of people we could have inside to a point where I'm not sure we're really gaining anything.
Right.
But we are still open for takeout and delivery. We have our Shabasket. Shabasket.com is a website where you can order, and we will bring to you, a bag which has your challah and dessert and grape juice and all different things that you can, use for your Shabbat table. And we're on all the various delivery services. And, if you are looking to do something, you can support us and all the other restaurants that are, on the block and in the area, because we all really appreciate that support. I said to my wife, I'm looking forward to when all of this is, enough in the rear view, that we can have our customer appreciation day, where we open things up and, are able to offer thanks in a way to all the people who have helped support us. I'm very excited and planning for that day. I don't know when it's going to be, but
maybe next forum.
Next forum would be great.
Yeah,
great.
That's a reasonable goal.
That is a very and not that ambitious. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Oh, and the Kosher Cookie Company, you can also.
Yeah. So sorry. So we and where I am right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a website called koshercookiecompany.com, and you can go on there to gift cookies to people or to yourself. And we have custom cookies that we'll make for you. We do a lot of bar and bat mitzvah and wedding cookies. And we were doing actually for graduations. I've got a couple of schools where they're, giving their graduates a package of custom cookies, because this is not what anyone had imagined when it came to graduation for all these kids.
Sure.
My son's 8th grade graduation included. and they're doing little things that just show that, you know, that there's still love out there, and what says love better than a cookie?
That's a good place to end.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom. Enjoy.
I'll be
Thanks,
in.
Sam.
I'll be in soon, hopefully. To get
All right. I look forward to seeing you.
baked goods. All right. See you.
All right. Take care.